have a debate on different.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. US immigration agents shoot and kill a US citizen in Minneapolis, sparking protests and condemnation from local leaders. The Department of Homeland Security says an agent fires in self-defense after the man approaches with a handgun and resists disarmament. Minnesota state investigators say federal agents refused to let them enter the Minneapolis shooting site despite a judge-signed warrant, deepening tension over immigration officer action. The refusal comes as local leaders push for independent review of federal actions after multiple fatal shootings in the city this month. Myanmar's military chief defends the election as final voting takes place, with the military-backed party already holding large parliamentary majorities. Major opposition groups boycott the polls, while the UN and rights groups denounce the vote as a sham to entrench military rule. US, Russian and Ukrainian officials hold constructive talks in the UAE on possible parameters to end the war. Negotiators agree to report back to their capitals and return for another round on February the 1st. Donald Trump threatens a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods if Ottawa strikes a trade deal with China. The warning comes as US-Canada ties strain after Canada announces a strategic partnership with Beijing. Rescuers in Indonesia search for 80 missing people after a landslide kills at least 10 in West Java. Authorities say heavy rains trigger the slide and warn bad weather could continue for days. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung withdraws his pick for the budget ministry chief. The move follows backlash over allegations of abusive conduct and controversial property dealings. A major US winter storm leaves more than 230,000 without power and triggers thousands of flight cancellations. Federal emergencies are declared in multiple states as forecasters warn of dangerous cold and heavy snow. We start in the United States and in a new development following yesterday's fatal shooting of 37-year-old Alex Pretty. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has voiced his support for ICE agents. In a recent social media post, Hegseth has praised the agency, saying they are saving the country, while also criticizing Minnesota leadership and the ongoing protests in the city. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, also called the BCA, has reported that it is being blocked from accessing the shooting scene by federal agents, despite it having a valid search warrant. The BCA Superintendent Drew Evans has stated that while the investigation will continue, the lack of cooperation from federal authorities will make it difficult to gather all necessary evidence. Moreover, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries has sharply criticized the Trump administration and the Department of Homeland Security. Jeffries has condemned the killing of Alex Pretty, calling it a horrific, preventable tragedy. He has echoed Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's call for a thorough independent investigation free from the Department of Homeland Security's interference. Joining us now is Gautam Mukherjee. He is a senior journalist and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Of course, Gautam, these comments from newly entitled Secretary of War Pete Hegseth are expected. The Trump administration has supported ICE agents throughout its duties during the second administration, especially during these controversies in Minnesota. And so, of course, Hegseth's comments are not unexpected. What does this say about the responsibility, the probing that the Trump administration is reluctant to do when it comes to the incidents that we've seen in Minneapolis, including this incident and, of course, the two other shootings, one of which, of course, resulted in the death of another US citizen?
Yes, well, this is not surprising considering that there is a pitched battle going on between the illegal immigrants, some of them supported by people in the administration, some of them supported by people who are citizens. So you result, with shooting on both sides. This has resulted in a couple of deaths of, as it turns out, a citizen and not an illegal immigrant.
But Gautam, of course, there was no shooting on either incident from the victim's side. Of course, there was alleged car ramming, which is, of course, disputed in the first case of Nicole Good. And now we have had the alleged lack of disarmament, that this tussle resulted in the death of the one that we have seen within the past 24 hours. But no shooting from the people who have been killed in these instances. I just wanted to get your insight on, of course, the fact that Minnesota and Minneapolis in particular officials have been blocked from the scene in accessing the place where these incidents have happened. This has happened in both cases now, both with Renee Good and now with Alex Pretty. Why would the state, why would the federal government block the state authorities in accessing these sites? Wouldn't communications between both levels be better in approaching the investigation?
Well, the problem is that the federal people want the Sudanese illegal immigrants out, along with several others from South America and elsewhere. And the state authorities have filled the place with these very immigrants under mainly the Biden administration. So they're at loggerheads with each other. One is trying to portray this as a human rights issue.
Okay.
The other is portraying it as a security issue and a illegal immigrant issue.
Okay, but Gautam, of course, neither of these victims of the shootings were immigrants at all. They were both US citizens. Both Nicole and Alex were both United States citizens that were, of course, approaching the ICE agents with some opposition to their actions in the city. Of course, the entire city is opposed to ICE being there, including the mayor and the governor of Minnesota State. So why isn't the federal government letting those state authorities investigate a crime or an incident which happened in their own city?
Well, as you've said, these two people, unfortunately, who have been killed, were both in support of the illegal immigrants, allegedly, and those aspects of the administration who are aiding and abetting them. So this would happen if there are federal agencies over there sent with the specific purpose of evicting these people or arresting them and deporting them. So, you've got basically a state versus federal government issue. The mayor made his position very clear in support of these immigrants, most of them illegal. And now the state administration, which is probably opposed to the central government, is making its position felt.
But why? I'm asking why wouldn't the state be allowed to investigate this? Of course, this is linked to some say the fact that the state government is Democrat-run, but these of course instances happened in Minneapolis, in a state that did vote for the Democrats. Of course, these are the states where ICE are usually deployed to. Why can't both the federal and the state government work together to determine what really happened here?
Well, that's the kind of polarization you've got in American politics today. The Democrats and the Republicans refuse to work together. They work as adversarial opponents. And as a consequence, the federal government has sent down these ICE troops and is saying, no, you can't come in here. It's up to the state. Maybe they can deploy their own troops. Who knows?
Okay. Gautam Mukherjee, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always. We now move on over to Europe for our next story. And the German police have arrested a Lebanese national on suspicion of being a member of Hamas and planning attacks in Europe. The man has been identified as Der Spiegel as Mohammed's and was stopped at Berlin's Brandenburg airport after arriving from Beirut. Federal prosecutors have stated that in August 2025, Mohammed helped to procure 300 rounds of ammunition and was involved in an alleged plot attack on Jewish and Israeli institutions. Mohammed is due to be brought before a federal judge who will decide on a pre-trial detention. Sol Sadka joins us now, a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv to discuss this further. Sol, of course, we know that Hamas does indeed govern the Gaza Strip, or used to. But what about its operations abroad, particularly in Europe, and the threat that it shows there? What more can you tell us?
Good to be with you, Thomas. It was entirely predictable from the beginning of the war 2.5 years ago now, that as soon as Hamas were defeated or near enough defeated in Gaza, in the Middle East, they would find ways to lash out at Jewish and Israeli targets around the world. That's always been their modus operandi. And it's much harder to attack Jews in Israel now, with the IDF standing between them and the Israelis, than it is to attack those targets in Europe, where they are only protected by mostly unarmed police. And so what we're seeing here today is a lucky break, although there have been attacks over the past months from Manchester to Sydney to DC to Denver, where Jews and Israeli targets have not been as lucky as this. And we have lost about 30 people.
And what about Hamas abroad in general? Of course, we know that they operate outside the Middle East, but we don't often hear of them operating in Europe. What does that say about online radicalization when it comes to this ideology?
The extent of their operations to radicalize local Western-based Muslims is not insignificant at all. We have seen many cases, and in fact, we have seen it with ISIS as well. Many of the fighters that are currently being released from jails in Syria were initially of Western origin, where they were born, perhaps second-generation immigrants, and they were radicalized by online forums into going and dying for the Islamic State. And the same thing can be seen with Hamas. In this particular case, it does appear that this particular activist or terrorist was flying into Germany from the Middle East. Hamas, while they are primarily based in Gaza, they also have extensive activities in Judea and Samaria, and also in Lebanon. Lebanon, of course, currently is going through a process, or attempting to go through a process of de-radicalization. Hezbollah are very much on the ropes, and Hamas, while they're Sunni allies in Lebanon, Hezbollah just now has been shutting down its institutions, seeing as it's basically run out of money. And Hamas, no doubt, is in similar dire straits, seeing as their primary sponsor, the Iranian regime, is in a complete mess at the moment. So all these things are tied together. The head of the snake in Iran can no longer fund their proxies, such as Hamas and Hezbollah. But what they can perhaps do is they can threaten people in the West. Very simple attacks with a single gun or a small bomb or a grenade can be extremely bloody against an unprotected population. And it looks like that, unless we're very lucky, that's what we might be seeing in the months and years to come.
So do stay with us as we move over to our next story. We turn over to the Middle East next, and Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has reportedly moved to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran. The move follows security assessments warning of a possible US attack. It comes after President Donald Trump said American warships are moving closer to Iran, warning of potential action. Reports say the bunker is heavily fortified with interconnected tunnels beneath the capital. Reports also suggest that Khamenei's son, Masoud Khamenei, is now overseeing daily affairs and acting as the main link with Iran's government. Tensions sparked after Trump spoke of a major US naval buildup, and Iran has responded with its strongest warning yet, saying any strike would be treated as an all-out attack and an act of war. Sol Sadka joins us once again. Of course, this is a reported development. It's not, can't be independently verified, but suggesting that the Ayatollah is moving into a bunker in Tehran. Does this indicate successful deterrence and a sign that the Iranian regime is weak enough to and will topple soon?
One could only hope so. There are two ways that the Iranian regime goes down at this point. It can either go down in a fast, kinetic way, with help perhaps from the United States. There are rumors of other Western nations, such as the UK, who also might be willing to involve themselves in a strike. What we have seen, with perhaps 45,000 people dead over a few weeks under an internet blackout that the Iranian regime imposed, it's something they learned from the Arab Spring. They realized that the internet was a great threat to their ideology, which really can't function under the light of the internet. And so they knew that when the protesters would come, they would have to turn off the internet. And they prepared for this for decades. And the primary way that a regime like this can stay in power is by simply slaughtering their own citizens to the extent that the rest of them will be too frightened to continue. But the blowback for this will be vast. And as Khamenei goes down into his bunker, if this is true, he is very wise to go down to his bunker, although that certainly will not help him. I assure you, the Americans know exactly where he is. We know this because the IRGC have proven to be completely infiltrated with spies on every level. There are rumors that up to 20% of all members of the IRGC are somehow in contact with foreign intelligence. So for them, it is hopeless. The only question is, does it go down in an increasingly bloody way, perhaps followed by civilian strife and inter-ethnic strife, because after all, Iranians are majority non-Persian. They're majority minority as a nation. Or does it go down with a kind of peaceful revolution, relatively, as was seen 47 years ago, even though the results of that relatively peaceful revolution were anything if not.
And so Iran says any strike will be treated as an all-out war. Do you think Israel and the United States think Iran is bluffing, and does it have the capabilities to launch something as so?
Oh, I'm sure they're not bluffing. But the problem for Iran is they're faced with a dilemma. That if they attack back at Israel, say America attacks them, and they aim their weapons again at Israel. Last time, if you recall, they fired about 600 vast bus-sized missiles at Israel, and about 10% of them got through the air defenses. And between those 600 missiles, they managed to kill 30 Israeli civilians, not a single member of the military. Now, of course, that has no effect strategically on Israel. It just causes some insurance damage and some tragic funerals. But strategically, that has no effect. So if they do that, then not only will they be facing the might of the American battle groups and Air Force arrayed against them in the region, they will also be facing the Israeli military, which has proven themselves extremely effective. So if they do decide to attack Israel in that way, they will face a vast retaliation, and that will be the end of them. So really, if they decide to attack either America or Israel in retaliation for whatever America may or may not do, that is the beginning of the end of their regime and the beginning of the end of all the lives of the people that make those decisions. which is why in the past, when they have threatened this kind of bellicose retaliation, they have always done so in a truly symbolic and pathetic way. For example, when they attacked Qatar after the Americans blew up with Midnight Hammer their entire nuclear program they'd worked on for 40 years, they responded with a couple of missiles aimed at the sand around an American base in Qatar, and they gave America a warning of exactly what time and with what they would be attacking, so the Americans were able to evacuate. So allowing them to save face and thereby ending the war. So whatever they're saying, they are not capable of it. They are capable of only lashing out in a way that will guarantee their own demise.
Saul Sadka, thank you very much for joining us and taking the time. We now move on and over to South Asia, and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has begun a 4-day visit to India ahead of the 16th EU-India summit next week. She will be joined by European Council President Antonio Costa for talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on January the 27th. Both leaders will attend India's Republic Day celebrations as chief guests on January the 26th. The summit comes amid growing global uncertainty linked to US economic and security policies under President Donald Trump. India and the European Union are expected to announce the conclusion of a long-awaited free trade agreement. They are also set to firm up a strategic defence partnership and a mobility framework for Indian professionals. The EU is India's largest trading partner in goods, with bilateral trade crossing $136 billion last year. Gautam Mukherjee joins us once again to give us some more on this significant visit by Ursula von der Leyen and other European diplomats to New Delhi. Gautam, what can you tell us about this? First of all, about the significance of the visit and, of course, this long-awaited free trade agreement that will supposedly be inked in the next 4 days.
Well, this is a tremendous development, which juxtaposed with the fact that the American intermediate trade agreement is also approaching closure and inking. The whole of the EU, 27-member EU, backed also and intertwined with a 33-member NATO, has over $22 trillion in GDP, about $30 trillion on a PPP basis. So in every way, the whole of the EU is more or less equivalent to the American economy. Now, the Europeans want a close defense and strategic tie-up with India. France and Germany are very active on various programs. Germany is doing the submarine possibility, almost inked, $8 billion worth. And France is about to ink a big Rafale deal worth about $30 billion. That's just two of them. There are others. Spain is making transport aircraft in India. Italy is supplying torpedoes to the submarine fleet in India. So all in all, a trade deal plus a security deal with the EU will mean a doubling of exports, great exchange of technology, collaborations. It will be a great fillip to India approaching the third largest economy in the world, and in fact growing from there within the third slot to between 5 and 7 trillion upwards to 10, 15, and who knows how much more. So this is extremely significant. It takes some of the wind out of the sails of American tariffing of India. There is already a statement from Hegseth which says the 25% additional tariffs based on purchases of oil from Russia may be lifted soon. I believe the American deal will also be inked soon. So that means India firmly embedded in the value chains of both Europe and America, and very good prospects ahead, both for the economy and for technology and defense.
Yes, Gautam Mukherjee, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on, and the ICC has announced that Scotland will replace Bangladesh at the ICC Men's T20 World Cup 2026. This came after the Bangladesh Cricket Board refused to participate in the tournament per the published match schedule. Scotland has been called up to take Bangladesh's place in Group C, joining England, Italy, Nepal and the West Indies. The announcement comes after the ICC, in the absence of any credible or verifiable security threat to the Bangladesh national team in India, rejected the BCB's request to move their matches from India to Sri Lanka, who are the co-hosts of the tournament, which commences on February the 7th. Scotland are the next highest ranked T20I team that had originally missed T20 World Cup qualification. They are currently ranked 14th, which in fact is ahead of competing teams Namibia, the United Arab Emirates, Nepal, USA, Canada, Oman and Italy. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.